Well, hey there. Sorry, I'm popping in a few minutes late here today, but had a computer reboot, and we know how all of that goes. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Megan Summerall. I am a time management and planning expert for women. And today I want to help explain to you all exactly why delegating does not actually help lighten the mental load. All right. Now, one of the things that I am really pleased about is that I am seeing so many conversations, a lot of influencers, experts, etc., really starting to lean into educating folks on the fact that women do, especially if you're a mom, but you don't even have to be a mom, we do tend to carry the burden of what is now being referred to as the mental load. The awareness that there is usually just voices going in our head all the time, right? Of things that we're thinking about, worrying about, wondering about. And a lot of times the mental load doesn't actually translate into specific tasks. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it's those longer term things that we're thinking about. Now, while I love the fact that I am seeing this, becoming public, like a lot of awareness around it, people are talking about it, we're addressing, hey, this is a problem. One of the things I don't love is that I am seeing solutions being offered up that actually do not help lighten the mental load, especially from the planning and productivity community. And this is why everything I teach is so different. This is what differentiates the top framework and my approach to planning for women is that I am acknowledging we have this mental load and we need to have a planning system that acknowledges it and then gives us the tools that we need to plan for that, for lack of a better word. So, the number one thing that I'm seeing people teach to help lighten the mental load is delegating. And I'm here to tell you delegating does not lighten your mental load. All right. So, first, I want to tell you why it doesn't, and then I want to tell you what can work instead. So, think about the act of delegating something, right? It's when you're taking something off your plate and then you're asking somebody else to do it. But 99% of the time, especially for women, anytime we are trying, an attempt to delegate, what happens is only part of the entire task actually gets delegated. And oftentimes we then have to project management. So we're having to check in, we're having to remind people, right? Nothing that has not lightened our mental load at all. And I think a great example is I was actually sharing this concept with actually one of my sisters just about a week or two ago. And I was explaining to her why delegating does not lighten the mental load. And she's like, what do you mean? And so we kind of remembered a time in her stage when her kids were younger and there was a lot of driving to soccer practices, swim practices, etc. And she was like, oh my gosh, I get what you're saying now. She's like, I can remember there would be times where, my husband would be the one, the kid's dad would be driving them to soccer practice. But she's like, what that meant for me was still the 30 minutes leading up to it. I was getting the snack and packing the bags and getting the cleats out. And was this washed and was that washed and the water bottles, right? And all the moving parts so that then, their dad could just arrive and the kids go in the car and off to soccer practice. But then she was still managing the soccer schedule and the stuff on the calendars, right? So having yes, you got a little 20-minute time of your life freed up by not driving there and back, but that certainly did not lighten the mental load because she was still involved with all the prep work for it. And then the thinking about, do we have cleats the right size? Do we have shin guards, right? So the mere act of delegating oftentimes does not lighten our mental load because we're still orchestrating parts of whatever the activity or task or whatever is, or there are things that take more thoughtful planning, and then we're having to do the constant reminding. So this is why delegating a lot of times really does not help lighten your mental load at all. Now, here's the subtle difference of what does, and it's complete transfer of ownership. All right, meaning you are saying, I am no longer responsible for any part of this, and I am now transferring ownership to someone else who is. Think of it almost like selling your house, right? If you own your own home and you're living in your house, you're thinking about all the upkeep. How's the roof doing? How's the hot water heater, right? Oh, look, do we need to paint on the outside? All that kind of stuff. If you were to just rent your house out, you're still responsible for that house. Someone else is in there, but you're still thinking about all the stuff around it. Whereas if you were to actually go and sell your home, you've now transferred ownership of your house to someone else and all of the responsibility that goes with it. So back to the example of the soccer practice, right? What transfer of ownership there could be in that scenario is, hey, soccer practice is on Tuesday and Thursday at 4:00. And you, whoever the other person is, are responsible for making sure they have everything they need and getting them there on time and picking them back up, right? Meaning you aren't doing any of it. And Nikki, I agree, saying that's a scary move for those who prefer to be in control. And that leads me to my next point of how do we start to transfer ownership if we are people that like to be in control? And I am a fellow recovering-ish control freak. So here's my suggestion for you. I would take a look at the things in your life that are taking up a lot of mental load, right? And what you want to identify first is what is something that you are not completely married to a specific outcome for, right? Because we all have some things where we're like, ooh, I want to let go, but I want it done. I want it to look exactly this way. Well, you're not going to be able to transfer ownership if you're not going to be able to lighten up control. So the easiest way to start to dip our toe into this water is to find something where you're like, you know what? I am not 100% married to what the outcome of this looks like. I'm willing to say it can look different than how I would do it. And that's a great place to start. Because what starts to happen is the more you start to transfer and the lighter that mental load comes, the less you feel the need to be in control. It's a vicious cycle. It's hard for us to let go of the reins because we are managing so much, right? And we're like, if one goes, it's all going to fall apart. Whereas once we find one thing we've transferred ownership of and we start to see the rewards of that, now we don't feel like we need to maintain quite so much control. And the next one comes easier, the next one comes easier, etc. Now, the final thing, in order for this transfer of ownership to work, is there needs to be a agreed upon communication and understanding of what that means to the person you're transferring to, and they need to take that on. And then that means, guess what? We got to walk away. We got to walk away and let them take it on. One of the silly examples I've shared on something we transferred ownership of just in the last several months, although we're on summer break now is the time I'm doing this video, was starting in January, I transferred complete ownership to the school lunch situation for my daughter. Meaning I don't want to have to ask her the type of stuff she wants. I don't want to grocery shop for it. And I don't pack it. Like full transfer of ownership. I don't even worry about those things. Now, for the first week, as I would be within earshot as school lunches are being packed and the negotiating is going on between my husband and my daughter with it, it was very hard for me to not jump in and be like, oh, I wouldn't, right? And I was like, Megan, let it go. Megan, do you want to own this? No, I do not. And I kept having that conversation, right? Let it go. And now it doesn't even, it goes on, it goes in one ear and out the other. I feel no worry about anything that's happening. And it's unbelievably freeing. So you don't have to overthink it. It doesn't need to be something massive, but the small wins you can get of just getting one thing off your plate, full transfer of ownership. You're not project managing it. You're not checking in. You're not doing half and letting someone else do the half, right? That is how we really can start to lighten the mental load. And Nikki's saying struggling as my kids are moving into adulthood. And this may be something where you have a conversation with them. Because I have a hard time transferring ownership with a child starting to move into adulthood as well. And there have been some things that we've transferred ownership on where then it's kind of created this was a horrible situation, but guess what? It only happens once. And you're not going to know unless you test it, right? Say, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's see, can you do this, right? And you may need to do it alongside them for a couple weeks until they're fully equipped to transfer that as well. But I am learning for myself. They're always so much more ready far sooner than we think they are. But we just get in the habit of doing it, right? So my hope for all of you is that you can pick one thing to start actually transferring ownership on today. All right, guys, have a great rest of your week.